The beautiful tropical sun hung low over the vast red plains of Tsavo National Park. It was 1973 and the air was filled with the low rumble of elephant herds, matriarchs leading their families to the shrinking waterholes, calves stumbling in their wake, trunks raised in tentative greeting to the wind. Kenya's elephants, once numbering over 120,000 strong, roamed these lands as kings and queens of the savannah, their tusks gleaming like curved sabers forged from the bones of ancient giants. To the Maasai herders and combat trackers who shared these territories, the elephants were not mere beasts but guardians of the soil, their thunderous migrations turning the dust into fertile promise. But beneath this fragile harmony, a shadow stirred, a hunger that knew no tribe, no border, only the dark, insatiable pull of wealth. In the marble-floored corridors of State House in Nairobi, far from the acacia-dotted wilds, Ngina Kenyatta, known to her admirers as Mama Ngina, the mother of the nation, moved with the quiet authority of a woman who had weathered colonial storms and birthed a president. Born Ngina Mohoho in 1933 to a Kikuyu chief, she married Jomo Kenyatta in 1951, a union that propelled her from a rural background in Kiambu to the pinnacle of post-independence power. At 40, she was elegant and unyielding, her dark eyes sharp as obsidian, her presence a blend of maternal warmth and iron resolve. Jomo, now in his twilight years as Kenya's founding father, leaned on her more than ever, his health fraying like the edges of the nation's new constitution. Ngina Kenyatta managed the family's growing empire, which included tea plantations in the highlands, sisal farms along the coast, and vast tracts of land greedily acquired from colonial settlers under the guise of redistribution. But land was slow money. It tied you to the soil, demanded patience. Ivory was liquid gold, portable, priceless, and pulsing with the lifeblood of the wild. The demand came from afar, a siren call from the bustling markets of Hong Kong, the carved trinkets of Japan, and the status symbols of China's elite. A single tusk could fetch $80 to $120 per kilogram, enough to inflate her dark empire with pomp and filthy riches. Ngina had first tasted this trade in the late 1960s, through whispers from her stepdaughter Margaret Kenyatta, Jomo's eldest child from his first marriage. Margaret, the fiery mayor of Nairobi at 45, chaired the United Africa Corporation, a commodity exporter that dealt in coffee, hides, and increasingly ivory. "It's legal, Mama," Margaret had said one evening over tea in the State House gardens, her voice low as the cicadas rose. "The game department has stockpiles from culls. Problem elephants, the crop raiders, man-eaters. We just, well, facilitate." But facilitation was a thin veil. The game department, underfunded and corrupt, turned a blind eye as rangers, some bribed with sacks of maize, others kin to the powerful, issued permits for culls that bordered on massacres. Ngina's entry was subtle at first, a favor to a ministerial ally, a crate of tusks gifted from a drought-killed herd in Meru National Park. She watched as they were crated, labeled as worked ivory for export, and loaded onto trucks bound for Mombasa's docks. The first shipment, in 1970, netted her $50,000, enough to expand the family's ranch in Laikipia. It was intoxicating, this alchemy of death into dollars. Soon, Ngina was the silent architect, her name unspoken but her influence absolute. Government vehicles, Land Rovers with presidential plates, ferried poachers into the parks under the cover of night. Local hunters, armed with poisoned arrows and aging muzzleloaders, followed. Kamba men from the hills, Somali herders from the north, even rogue wardens who knew the blind spots in the patrols. By 1973, the whispers had grown to roars. Conservationists like David Sheldrick, who ran the Tsavo orphanage for orphaned elephants, tallied the dead, 10,000 carcasses a year, their bones bleaching under the equatorial sun. "It's not poverty driving this," Sheldrick confided to a British journalist over warm Tusker beer. "It's the elite. They kill with impunity, and the herds pay." Ngina heard the murmurs but dismissed them as colonial holdovers, jealous expatriates envious of African self-rule. Jomo, ever cunning and sly, signed the ban on sport hunting that year, a nod to international pressure. But raw ivory exports? He restricted them in 1974, yet carved out exceptions, special licenses, whispered in cabinet meetings, for loyal exporters like United Africa. That autumn, in the dim glow of a kerosene lamp in its Tsavo Ranger outpost, a young Kamba tracker named Kito first crossed paths with the machine. He was 22, hired by the game department to monitor herds. Kito had grown up revering the elephants. The way old Tusker, a bull with tusks like scimitars, would trumpet at dawn, scattering impala like confetti. But that night, as stars wheeled overhead, he heard the engines first. 3 Toyota pickups, headlights doused, crunching over the baobab roots. From the lead vehicle stepped a man in a crisp safari suit. Not a ranger, but a minister's aide, his pistol glinting in the moonlight. "Orders from above," the man said, tossing Kito a wad of shillings. "Drive us to the waterhole. The big ones, the ones with the ivory." Kito's hands trembled on the wheel as they bumped through the thorn scrub. The poachers, 6 in all, carried AK-47s. They waited until the herd arrived, matriarch first, her calf nuzzling her flank. The first shot cracked like thunder. The bull beside her crumpled, his trumpet cut short in a spray of dust. Panic erupted, calves bolting into the dark, cows charging blindly. The poachers fired methodically, felling 8 in minutes. Kito retched as they hacked at the faces, saws whining through bone, blood slicking the ground. "For the queen," one poacher laughed, wiping his blade. The tusks, over 200 kilograms, were bundled into the trucks by dawn, destined for a warehouse in Nairobi, then a state plane to Hong Kong. In Parliament, opposition MP J.M. Kariuki railed against the vultures at the top, his voice drowned by KANU loyalists. But Kariuki knew too much. By 1975, he would be found murdered, his body dumped in the Ngong Hills, a warning etched in blood. Ngina, ensconced in her Kiambu estate, expanded the network. Her nephew, Dr. Joroge Mungai, health minister and family scion, secured permits for 5 tons from stockpiles. Margaret's firm handled another 15. In 6 months of 1974 alone, export records, leaked to a suspicious New Scientist reporter named John Tinker, showed 20 tons cleared, enough for 1,200 tusks, the death knell for 600 elephants. Tinker, a lanky Englishman with a nose for scandal, pieced it together in smoke-filled Nairobi cafes. His May 1975 expose hit like a grenade. Documentary proof that a Kenyatta family member exported over 6 tons to China. He named no names outright. Rumor-mongering was a crime in Kenya, but the portrait was damning. A ring using state planes, protected by presidential fiat, slaughtering herds at 20,000 a year. Ngina read the article in her sunlit parlor, her fingers tightening on the newsprint. "Blackmail," she hissed to Margaret over the phone. "Foreign vultures, circling our sovereignty." But in the quiet hours, as Jomo slept under his mosquito net, Ngina paced the verandas, calculating. The CIA, watching from Langley, filed its report. Ngina Kenyatta, Kenya's largest ivory and charcoal trader. Elite corruption, they noted, fueling a poaching surge that could collapse tourism, the nation's lifeblood. By late 1975, Tsavo's herds had thinned from 35,000 to under 20,000. Kito, haunted by the ghosts of the fallen, deserted his post, fleeing to the slums of Nairobi. There, in a shebeen reeking of changa, he whispered his story to a sympathetic expatriate warden. The dust of Tsavo settled heavier now, carrying the faint, metallic tang of blood and betrayal. The elephants, sensing the shift, migrated deeper into the unknown, their numbers a ticking clock toward oblivion. The year turned to 1976, and Nairobi pulsed with the contradictions of a young nation. skyscrapers piercing the sky beside mud-walled shanties, Mercedes gliding past barefoot hawkers. In the heart of it all stood the New Stanley Hotel, where foreign correspondents nursed gins and scribbled dispatches. Boyce Rendsburger, a New York Times reporter with a penchant for the underbelly, had arrived on a tip from Tinker. "Follow the permits," the Brit advised over a clinking glass. "They lead straight to the palace." Rendsburger's investigation unfolded like a detective novel, each thread pulling him deeper into the web. He pored over smuggled game department logs, entries for problem animal control that tallied 16,000 elephants, 235 rhinos, and 20 leopards in the prior half-year slaughter on an industrial scale. The tusks didn't vanish into thin air. They flowed to United Africa, Margaret's fiefdom, where crates were relabeled and shipped. One document, yellowed and stamped, authorized Margaret's firm for 10 tons post-ban, sourced from official culls. Jomo himself had signed off on 15 tons for her, 5 for Joroge, family business, rubber-stamped in the dead of night. Ngina's role was the linchpin, the queen on the chessboard. From her base in the family's sprawling Gatundu compound, she orchestrated the logistics. A trusted aide, a former Mau Mau fighter named Kamau, coordinated the poachers. Teams of 10 to 15, rotating through Tsavo, Meru, and Amboseli. They used everything: poisoned arrows tipped with acacanthera for silent kills, muzzle loaders for the bush, machine guns for herds. Protection came layered. Local chiefs paid to look away, rangers bribed or threatened. Ministers like Mbiu Koinege, Jomo's brother-in-law, diverting funds to conservation that bought silence. Tusks were trucked to hidden depots in Kiambu, sawn and bundled, then whisked to Wilson Airport in diplomatic pouches. The presidential jet, a gleaming VC-10, ferried them to Asia twice monthly, manifests listing agricultural samples. The profits were staggering. $10 million annually for the inner circle, equivalent to $500 million shillings today. A single elephant yielded $2,000 to $5,000. A ton of ivory, $60,000. Charcoal complemented it, stripped from protected acacias, earning her another fortune as forests withered. In a Meru thicket, a poacher named Juma, recruited from the slums, felled a cow and her calf one dawn. The little one's tusk barely filled a satchel, but Juma pocketed 500 shillings. "For the Queen's table," his boss joked, slapping his back. Juma dreamed of buying a plot. Instead, he bought a grave 2 raids later, ambushed by rival poachers. The expose broke in September 1975, Rendsburger's byline searing the Times front page, "Elephants declining rapidly in Africa." He detailed the family ties, the post-ban exports, and the game department's complicity. Rumors of Kenyatta involvement have circulated since 1973, he wrote, but now documentary evidence emerges. Parliament erupted. Kariuki's ghost loomed as MPs debated a probe into the tourism ministry. But power is a shield. The motion fizzled, drowned in procedural fog. Jomo, frail in his chair, fumed privately. "Imperialist lies," he growled to Ngina. She nodded, but her mind raced. The government's rebuttal came swiftly. A 5-page missive from the Kenyan news agency in June, branding the claims scandalous blackmail. Exports were pre-ban legal, elephant counts guesswork. No investigations followed. Poaching surged. Underground, the network tightened. Ngina met buyers in hushed Mombasa hotels, Chinese envoys with briefcases of cash, Japanese carvers promising more. A declassified CIA cable from that year painted her starkly. Top ivory/charcoal trader. Elite corruption enabling poaching surge. Historian Charles Hornsby later chronicled it in unfinished state. Ministers buying tusks direct from headquarters, government vehicles as getaway cars. Eyewitnesses emerged. An expatriate official, quoted anonymously, "Ngina's the matron. She doesn't pull triggers, but she signs the permits." By 1978, as Jomo's health crumbled, the toll mounted. Kenya's elephants dwindled to 20,000, and Tsavo became a graveyard of skulls. Ngina's wealth ballooned. Ranches, hotels, a stake in ruby mines seized from American prospectors. Kito, now a street vendor in Kibera, caught a glimpse of her once, cruising in a black Mercedes, flanked by bodyguards. The gambit had paid, but the board was emptying. Herds scattering, journalists circling, the wild crying for reckoning. Jomo Kenyatta died on August 22, 1978, his passing a thunderclap that shook the republic. Nairobi draped in black, but beneath the mourning, the ivory trade stuttered. Ngina, veiled in widow's weeds, stood resolute at the funeral, her empire intact but shadowed. The CIA's post-mortem report warned of backlash, public resentment over family corruption. Ivory, charcoal, could spark revolt. Vice President Daniel Arap Moi, the unassuming successor, eyed the spoils warily. Would he seize the lands, probe the poaching? Ngina braced, her lawyers circling like vultures. The 1980s dawned bloody. Poaching peaked. Kenya was a transit hub for tusks from Tanzania and Sudan. Richard Leakey, the fiery paleoanthropologist, took the helm of the newly formed Kenya Wildlife Service in 1989, armed with a mandate and a mustache. His rangers, paid properly for the first time, hunted poachers with helicopters and AKs. Elephants stabilized at 20,000, a fragile rebound. But impunity lingered. No charges stuck to Ngina. Her denials, through proxies, echoed the 1975 rebuttal. The irony bit deepest in the family. Margaret, the younger, Uhuru's wife, launched Hands Off Our Elephants in 2013, burning stockpiles and championing sites. Uhuru echoed her in 2016, torching $105 million in ivory